Let's continue looking at some background information on what you need to know when using NatureServe data. We've looked at the what is it and where is it considerations in segment 2. Now let's look at relative importance or significance. In maps of NatureServe species, legends can of course be used to indicate conservation priorities. At the subnational level, in this example, the highest priority would be the brook floater mussel at the lower left, which is critically imperiled. But another very useful piece of information is the element occurrence rank. EO ranks assess a single population rather than the entire species. They are based on viability. How likely is the EO to persist? 3 factors contribute to EO rank: size, which can be numbers or area, condition of the EO, such as evidence of reproduction, and landscape context, which is the status of the area around the EO. Basic ranks for element occurrences are on an A to D scale, dropping from excellent viability, or A, to poor, which is D. If there is not enough information to estimate viability, a rank of E or extant simply says it was observed to be present. H, or historical, means it was last known to be present a long time ago. At least 20 to 40 years is the usual time frame used. F means a historical EO was searched for but not found, failed to find. And X, or extirpated, is reserved for cases where an EO was not only not found, but there is documented habitat destruction or other evidence of eradication. To emphasize the priorities will change depending on what factor is considered, we'll look again at the legend showing subnational conservation rank that we just saw. Now, let's change the legend to show EO rank. Keep your eye on the critically imperiled, or bright pink, mussel EO in the lower left. We now see that the mussel in the lower left has a lower EO rank than the other EOs. In this example, although the mussel is the most at-risk element, this particular occurrence may not be a priority because it is already judged to have poor viability. It could be a very small population, or be in a stretch of river lined with houses with leaking septic tanks. Of course, it could still be a conservation priority, but an EO rank of D indicates that conserving it will be a major challenge. EO ranks are very useful, but they can be difficult to determine. There is a temptation for programs to assign A ranks to the best example of a species in their state or province. Suppose in this case that the size of these patches corresponds to the quality of the EO. In this example, the jurisdiction on the right has assigned an A rank to an EO that is the same size as a C rank EO just across a political boundary. One of our goals is for all member programs to use the same ranking criteria, but be aware that this does not always happen. Also remember that size alone does not determine EO rank. There could be a small population in very good condition or in a pristine landscape which might get a higher rank than a much larger occurrence. In addition to element occurrence ranks, an important indicator of the quality of an occurrence is when it was last observed. The last observed date for an EO is straightforward, consistent across all programs, and absolutely essential to consider for any use of NatureServe data. It's the date when the element was last known to be present at a given site. To be more specific, that means that someone not only observed it, but also reported that observation to the member program. In the example of the cell tower proposed for Nuds Hill, consider how different the situation would be if the small whorled begonia, a federally endangered species in the United States were based on a specimen from the 1800s versus one that was observed within the last 5 years. On the one hand, ancient records are useful. They tell us that appropriate habitat used to be here, and if the habitat is still present, a survey may be successful in finding the element. But they also put up a red flag that finding out whether this at-risk species is present will require survey effort. A common standard for project reviews, like the one for this cell tower, is only to require extra effort from the developer if there is recent knowledge of at-risk species in the area. For example, if the last observed date is within the last 20 years. Finally, let's look at factors related to the landscape and the species biology that may be important to consider. We'll take one more look at the example of a cell tower proposed on the top of Nuds Hill. Topographic location tells you where water flow may carry sediment or pollution, either during construction or afterwards. For example, there are no streams shown on the hill, but the contour lines show a couple of drainages coming down toward the river. It also suggests that the Blandings turtle and Arethusa populations, being on the other side of the river, will not be directly impacted. However, for the Arethusa, the National Wetlands Inventory shows that the same type of wetland exists on the site. Ideally, this wetland would be surveyed for Arethusa, at the right time of year, of course. Note also that National Wetlands Inventory maps may give a better idea of areas used by the Blandings turtle that was found on the road. The point here is that natural heritage records are a starting point, not the end point, regarding what areas are important to protect biodiversity. An example of the importance of considering life history can be made with the northern goshawk. The goshawk may only be sensitive to disturbance by construction activity during a short period while it's nesting, so the cell phone tower project might go forward if construction does not overlap with the nesting season. If additional survey work were required, for example for the Arethusa, you would need to understand its life history to make sure the survey was done at the time of year when that species would be visible and identifiable. Some plants can only be identified when in fruit or flower. For a project-specific evaluation of natural heritage data at one site, this might be the map that would actually be provided to the developer and any regulatory authorities. Species judged not to be at risk based on topography or life history are not shown at all. And note that the exact location of the ginseng, which has commercial value and is at risk of collection, is not shown. It's common for member programs to fuzz the location of particularly sensitive species, and we'll go into more detail on that later. Let's review for a moment. For this, I'll use individual EOs to illustrate the effect of decisions made when the area being considered is so large that you can't look at each EO. This is an example from Segment 1, where all known records of rare elements were combined into one index in order to identify biodiversity hotspots in the Lake St. Clair area. From here on, when we look at the Nuds Hill example, imagine that it is part of a landscape scale analysis such as this one, and we're zoomed into one small piece of the study area. Using the questions we've gone over, one important consideration is which tracked elements the analysis should focus on. For example, if you were looking only at legally listed species, all these records except the mussel and the small whorled begonia would disappear. Locational uncertainty will have a major effect on any analysis. Decisions to make include: should records with low precision be included at all? Alternatively, Should high-precision records mapped as a single point be buffered to include probable habitat in the area? And how much of the mapped area needs to be in an area to consider that area important to the survival of the occurrence? The small whorled begonia and northern goshawk could drop out if low-precision records are excluded. Records with high precision may be exact as regards the observation, but may leave out a lot of essential habitat. Adding buffers can result in a more realistic analysis of what areas are needed by rare species. When looking at conservation priorities across many EOs, consider weighting them based on species characteristics such as conservation status or element occurrence characteristics such as EO rank and last date observed. We already saw how different EOs will be prioritized based on conservation status of the species, as opposed to the EO rank of the occurrence. And we probably would not want specimens from the 1800s to have the same weight in an analysis as more recently observed EOs. I won't show details for many things that could influence impacts to the species viability, but just as an example, if a project's impacts are going to be mostly on water quality, you might want to limit analyses to aquatic or riparian species. It's a lot to have to think about, but natural heritage data provides planners with a framework for evaluation and analysis, and the result is usually a simplified, focused set of project-specific issues that, when dealt with properly, can result in high-quality conclusions.
Congratulations! You have successfully completed Segment 3. Please continue on to Segment 4 of Data Use Training.